The sky was still gray when Maria opened her eyes. Another morning had come, but nothing had changed. Her small broken room was still cold. The tin roof above her still leaked whenever it rained, and the walls still had cracks wide enough for the wind to slip through. She sat up slowly, pulling the thin blanket back over her sleeping son. Nico, his tiny chest moved up and down with soft, tired breaths. 7 years old, yet already familiar with hunger. Maria walked quietly to the corner of the room where their food shelf stood. She opened it slowly, even though she already knew. Empty, not a single grain of rice, not even a tea bag. Her eyes rested on the shelf for a moment, as if staring longer might make something appear. Her stomach made a sound loud and sharp, but she ignored it. She touched the pocket of her dress. One note. Just one small note. Barely enough for milk, maybe bread, if she bargained well. Her heart ached. That money was meant for Nico. His school had asked for his exam fee next week, and he needed a uniform. But how could she send him to school hungry? She sighed deeply, covered her hair with her faded scarf, and stepped outside. The slum was already awake. People moved about with buckets, old brooms, and sleepy children. Water dripped from clotheslines, dogs barked near garbage piles, and the smell of burning coal filled the air. Maria walked quickly, trying not to think too much. She had to reach her job on time, or they'd cut her pay again. As she crossed into the busier streets, her eyes caught something unusual. Outside a grocery store, near a stack of old crates, sat an elderly woman. Her back was bent, her head low, and her thin hands clutched her shawl tightly. People passed by in a rush. Some looked at her, most didn't. A few frowned, thinking she was a beggar. No one stopped. Maria slowed down. Something in the woman's posture, tired, small, forgotten, felt familiar. She had seen it before, in herself and others like her. The woman looked up, just for a moment. Her eyes met Maria's. They were dry but full of something deep, not just hunger, pain, loneliness. Maria's steps stopped. She reached into her pocket and touched the single note again. Her hand froze. Then, slowly, she walked to a nearby tea stall. 1 bread roll and tea. Please, she said. She paid, turned back, and knelt beside the woman. Here, she whispered. It's not much, but it's warm. The woman stared at her, surprised. Then, slowly, she took the food with shaking hands. Thank you, child, she said. No one else stopped. Maria smiled gently, stood up and continued walking. She had no idea. That single act, that tiny moment, had just shifted her entire destiny. Maria had lived the same morning 1,000 times, yet each one felt heavier than the last. Long before the sun lit the sky, she was already awake, moving through the small dark room like a shadow. She didn't need an alarm clock. Hunger and worry always woke her before anything else. She folded the blanket back over her son, Nico, making sure his feet were covered. He always kicked off the covers in his sleep. For a moment, she watched him breathe, his small hands curled into fists near his chest. He was all she had left. She moved to the side of the room, where their belongings sat stacked in neat little piles. A few clothes, 2 plates, a cracked kettle, and a bucket. Everything had its place. Maria believed in keeping order, even if life around her was full of chaos. She quietly lit a match and boiled some water. There was no tea, just hot water to warm their throats in the cold. She poured a little into a chipped mug and placed it beside a small piece of yesterday's bread. That would be Nico's breakfast. She would go without. She scribbled a short note and left it by the mug. Eat slowly, my love. I will be back before the sun sleeps. She kissed his forehead once more and stepped out. Maria's routine never changed. She walked nearly 2 hours every day to get to her first job. The roads were long, and her feet were always sore, but bus fare was a luxury she couldn't afford. She passed through markets, side streets, and clean neighborhoods with tall gates and painted walls. She cleaned houses that were bigger than her entire street. She scrubbed floors that sparkled more than the brightest thing in her home. Some employers treated her like a ghost, others like a servant with no name. She didn't argue. She greeted everyone with quiet respect, kept her head down, and worked harder than anyone else. She never stole. She never begged. She carried herself with quiet pride. Even when she returned home with blistered hands and tired legs, she still found the strength to smile at her son and ask about his day. Maria had only one dream, one that stayed with her through every hardship. She wanted to send Nico to school, a real school, not just the free government center that only had broken benches and no books. She wanted him to wear a clean uniform, carry a school bag, and raise his hand in class with confidence. She wanted him to grow up into something the world would respect, something she never had the chance to become. But dreams cost money. Uniforms, books, shoes, fees, and Maria barely made enough to keep food in the house. Some days, she skipped meals so Nico could eat. Other days, they both went to bed hungry. Still, she never stopped dreaming, and she never stopped walking. Even when her feet were tired, even when the world seemed to ignore her completely, Maria held on to the hope that something better was waiting. She just didn't know when it would finally come. That afternoon, the sun beat down, Hard on the city, the streets buzzed with noise vendors, shouting prices, cars honking nonstop, children weaving through crowds. The heat stuck to the skin, and everything smelled like smoke and sweat. Maria had just finished her second cleaning. Shiffin was walking toward the market, hoping to buy something small for dinner with the few coins she had collected in tips. It wasn't much, just enough for a cup of rice and maybe a couple of tomatoes if the seller was kind. As she turned onto a crowded street near the market square, something caught her eye. There, just a few steps ahead, stood an old woman. Frail and bent, her back curved like a question mark. Her shawl was torn, and her dress was dusty and faded, the color long gone from the fabric. She leaned heavily on a crooked wooden cane and tried to take a step forward, but her body wobbled dangerously. People walked past her quickly, their eyes darting away. One man almost bumped into her but turned his shoulder sharply and kept going. Another woman gave her a disgusted look and muttered something under her breath. No one stopped. Maria did. Stepped closer, watching as the woman tried again to move but nearly stumbled. Without thinking, Maria reached out and held her arm gently. "Careful, Ma," she said softly. "Let me help you." The old woman looked at her, surprised. Her face was lined deeply with age, and her lips were cracked, but her eyes, though tired, still held a kind of quiet strength. "Thank you," she whispered, barely able to lift her voice. Maria helped her across the street slowly, shielding her from the crowd. When they reached the other side, the old woman looked so exhausted that Maria guided her to a shady spot near the wall of a closed shop. The woman sat down slowly, breathing hard. Maria knelt beside her, worry tightening her chest. "Have you eaten anything, Ma?" The woman shook her head. "Not today. Not yesterday either." Maria looked away for a moment, biting her lip. She touched her pocket, her fingers curled around the last bit of money she had. It wasn't even enough for a full meal, but what choice did she have? She walked to a roadside stall and bought a small cup of tea and a piece of warm, soft bread. She returned and handed it to the old woman. "Here, Ma, please eat. It's not much, but it's hot." The old woman took the food with trembling hands, her eyes shining with tears. She stared at Maria as if she couldn't believe what was happening. "You gave this to me," she said slowly, "even though you have nothing." Maria smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "We all need help sometimes." The old woman looked at her for a long moment, then said something that didn't seem important at the time but would echo through Maria's life forever. "Kindness like yours is rare. Thank you, child." Maria nodded, stood up, and walked. Never looking back. She didn't know that her life had already changed. The road ahead had already begun to twist. The next morning began like any other. Maria left her home early, her body still aching from the day before. Her shawl felt thinner in the morning chill, but she ignored it. As always, she made sure Nico had a little something to eat, a few pieces of boiled cassava she had managed to get from a kind neighbor. He smiled sleepily at her and waved as she stepped out, his small fingers smudged with dust. Maria's first stop was the large white house with the tall iron gate, where she worked twice a week. The maid opened the door with a frown, holding a phone to her ear. "Madame says you don't need to come inside today," she said. Maria blinked. "Why?" The maid looked uncomfortable. She covered the phone and leaned in slightly. She said, "She doesn't like your energy. Says you bring a gloomy feeling to the house. Sorry." "Oh." Before Maria could respond, the gate closed slowly in her face. She stood there in silence, the words sinking into her skin like cold water. Didn't like her energy. She had cleaned every corner of that house with love, even when her own house fell apart. She had smiled, greeted everyone politely, never once spoken back, but now, just like that, one of her few jobs was gone. She turned around and walked back, her footsteps heavy. She kept telling herself not to cry, not here, not in public. She had to stay strong. As she reached her street, she noticed a paper pinned to her front door. Her heart dropped. It was another notice from the landlord, the third one in 2 months, but this time, it was final. "You have 5 days to pay or leave the room. No more delay," it read in bold red letters. Maria pulled it down, her hands shaking. She looked around, hoping no one else had seen it. Her neighbors were kind, but pity was the last thing she wanted. She stepped inside, leaned against the door, and tried to breathe. She had barely enough to feed Nico. Rent was far beyond her reach. Her mind began spinning with ideas. Maybe she could borrow from someone. Maybe the church would help this time. Later, that day, she took the little money she had left and went to the local market. Nico's shoes had fallen apart, completely holes at the toes, sole coming loose. He needed new ones before the rainy season began. A man at the corner claimed to sell strong shoes at cheap prices. He smiled, showed her a new pair, and promised it was original. Just discounted. She handed him the money with hesitation, but hope sparkled in her heart. He wrapped the shoes in a black bag and gave it to her quickly. When she reached home and opened the package, her hands froze. The shoes inside were old, torn, and one was even the wrong size. She rushed back to the spot, but the man was gone. Vanished. Scammed. Night. She said little. She served Nico his food with a smile, and listened as he spoke about a lesson at school. She nodded and laughed gently, hiding the storm inside her chest. When he finally slept, curled up beside her on their mat, Maria turned to the wall and let silent tears fall. She didn't sob. She didn't scream. She just cried quietly, covering her mouth so she wouldn't wake him. She pressed her lips close to his ear and whispered through the tears, "I'll fix this. Somehow. I promise. My son." The next morning felt different, though Maria couldn't explain why. The sky was gray and heavy, as if it knew something she didn't. She wrapped her scarf around her head and swept the front of her home with slow, tired hands. Her back ached more than usual. Her body moved, but her heart was far away, lost in thoughts of overdue rent, lost jobs, and the shame of being fooled at the market. Nico played with a stick in the dirt nearby, humming a song he had made up himself. That little tune was the only bright sound in her world now. Just then, a black car rolled down the narrow path between the slum houses. It was the kind of car no one ever saw in their part of town, clean polished, with tinted windows that didn't belong among rusted roofs and muddy alleys. Neighbors paused, staring. Children pointed. Some people moved closer to see who had come. Maria stepped back, confused. The car stopped right in front of her home. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out. He didn't look like he belonged there either. His shoes were shiny, his face calm, and he held a sealed white envelope in one gloved hand. He looked at Maria and walked straight to her without a word. "For you," he said simply, holding out the envelope. Maria looked around, unsure. "Me? Yes? Mom? You are Maria?" "Yes." She nodded slowly, her hands trembling as she took the envelope. It had no name on it, just a smooth seal in gold. Before she could ask any questions, the man tipped his head politely and returned. To the car, the engine started, and within seconds, the car was gone, vanishing like smoke. Maria stood there frozen, the envelope still unopened in her hands. Nico ran over and stared at it wide-eyed. "Mama, what is it?" She didn't answer. She stepped inside her room, sat on the edge of the bed, and carefully broke the seal. Inside was a single card, thick, elegant, cream-colored. The writing was neat and formal. "You are invited to a private meeting at the Cross Building, penthouse floor tomorrow at 10 a.m. Transport will be provided. Your presence is important. No name, no reason, no signature." No signature. Maria stared at it, her heart pounding. The Cross Building. That was one of the tallest towers in the entire city. She had walked past it before, staring up at the glass windows and fancy doors from a distance. She had never dreamed of stepping inside. She clutched the card tighter. Was this a joke? A trap? Who would invite someone like her to a place like that? Her first thought was to ignore it. What if it was dangerous? What if they had mistaken her for someone else? But another thought crept in slowly. What if it wasn't a mistake? What if for the first time in her life something good was truly coming her way? Suspicious, nervous, but holding on to the tiniest sliver of hope, Maria made a quiet decision. She would go. The next day, at exactly 9:30 a.m., a sleek black car arrived outside Maria's slum. Her neighbors stood at a distance, whispering and watching as she stepped inside, dressed in her cleanest clothes, a faded blue dress and her old scarf, freshly washed. Her hands trembled in her lap during the ride, her eyes wide as the car moved smoothly through parts of the city she had only ever seen from afar. Shining buildings, clean roads, people in suits. Everything felt like a different world. When the car finally stopped in front of the Cross Building, Maria's breath caught in her throat. The tower rose high into the sky, its glass walls reflecting the sun like diamonds. She had seen it before from across the street, but never imagined she would walk through its doors. Two tall guards opened the entrance for her without a word. Inside, marble floors gleamed beneath her feet, and everything smelled clean like new books and polished stone. A woman in a black dress greeted her gently. "Miss Maria, please come with me." Maria nodded and followed, her legs stiff and unsure. She was taken into a private elevator that rose higher and higher until it stopped at the very top penthouse floor. The doors opened to reveal a vast room with floor-to-ceiling windows, smooth white walls, and soft lights. In the center stood a long table, empty except for a large digital screen on the wall. The assistant motioned for Maria to sit. As soon as she did, the screen flickered. Maria gasped. There. On the screen was the old woman, no longer dusty or bent over, but dressed in a soft cream-colored suit, her hair brushed neatly. Her voice calm and steady. "Maria," the woman said, her voice clear now. "I remember your eyes. I remember your kindness." Maria's mouth fell open. "Ma," the woman smiled gently. "Yes, I am the same woman you helped by the street. The tea, the bread, your only money, given to a stranger." Maria's head spun. None of it made sense. Why was she here? Then the doors behind her opened, and in walked a tall man in a navy blue suit, sharp, confident, and familiar from the newspapers Maria sometimes saw at newsstands. Daniel Cross, CEO of Crosstech, youngest billionaire in the country. He walked over and stood beside the screen, folding his hands. "My name is Daniel Cross," he said, "and this is my mother." Maria stared, frozen. She was testing people, Daniel continued. Not for science, for kindness. We had sent her out in secret, no money, no guards, no name, just to see if compassion still lived in this world. He paused, his voice firm. Most ignored her. Some were cruel, but you gave her your last coin. You held her hand. You didn't walk away. He looked her straight in the eyes. You passed. Maria couldn't speak. Her hands clutched her scarf. Her heart beat so loud she could barely hear the silence that followed. What had just happened didn't feel real. Maria sat frozen in her chair, her lips slightly parted, her eyes wide and blinking. The room felt too bright, too quiet. As Daniel Cross walked slowly to the other side of the table and placed a folder in front of her. Inside were papers, official ones with her name written neatly at the top. "This," Daniel said gently, "is a formal offer. We want you to work with our company's foundation. We need people who understand struggle and who carry true compassion. You'll help manage outreach programs for women and children in poor communities, something you've lived through yourself." Maria blinked again, her hand slowly reaching for the folder but not yet touching it. Daniel continued, "There's also a new apartment waiting for you and your son, fully paid, safe, clean, furnished. And we've already contacted a top private school in the city. Your son has a place there. His tuition, his uniform, his books, everything is covered." Her breath caught. "You'll never have to skip a meal again. You'll never beg for work again. You helped my mother with nothing to gain, and now it's our turn." The room spun. Maria pressed her hand over her heart, trying to steady it. A tear rolled down her cheek, then another, and another. She lowered her head and cried, not from sadness, but from the flood of emotion she had held back for so long. All the nights she had gone to bed hungry, the times she had whispered promises into Nico's ears, the silent prayers she had sent into the sky, they all came pouring out in that moment. Daniel waited quietly. When she could finally speak, her voice trembled like a leaf in the wind. "I don't know what to say yes," he replied with a soft smile. "That's all." Maria stood up slowly and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her. The entire city lay before her, wide, endless, shining in the sunlight. She had never seen it from this high before. From down below, everything had always looked unreachable. But from here, it felt different. It felt possible. She pressed her hand gently against the glass, her tears still falling, and whispered, "I never thought kindness could echo this far." Daniel stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. "It does," he said, "more than most people ever realize." Maria turned to him, her eyes filled with something new. Not fear, not hunger, not tiredness, hope. For the first time in years, she truly believed that life could change, not just for her, but for her son, and maybe even others like her. The morning sun shone gently on the school's clean pavement as Maria held Nico's small hand in hers. He wore a brand new uniform, crisp white shirt, navy blue trousers, and polished shoes that clicked with every step. A backpack hung on his shoulders, not too big, not too small, just perfect. His eyes sparkled with excitement and a little nervousness. Maria knelt down, adjusted his collar, and smiled. "You look like a real scholar," she whispered. Nico giggled and hugged her tightly. They walked slowly toward the school gate, where other children waited with laughter and chatter. Maria's steps were calm now, no longer heavy with worry. She watched her son take those final few steps toward the classroom door, his head held high, his future wide open. As she stood there watching him go, a voice echoed softly in the background. Life didn't change because she was lucky. It changed because she stayed good even when life wasn't. Her scarf danced gently in the breeze, her eyes glistened with tears, but this time they were full of peace, not pain. On screen, the final message appeared in bold, steady letters. "The world tests you when you have nothing, but it rewards you when you give. Anyway." And with that, Maria turned and walked back down the path, not just as a mother or a cleaner, but as a woman who had faced the storm with kindness and come out shining.